If you're thinking of walking the coast to coast path, then this video is for you. I've just got back from the trail and this is a review of the equipment that I used, and I've got 8 top tips to help you enjoy the trip. So first off, let's look at the gear that I used. I did the trail in about 11 days. I chose to camp most nights. It would have been a lot easier to use B&Bs and to have my luggage transferred, and a lot of people use it that way, and I totally get that, but that comes at a cost. You know, it would have cost over £1,000 to do it that way. Campsites are usually worked out about 10 or 12 quid a night, so it was a lot cheaper to carry my own gear. But of course that meant that it was really important for me to keep my setup as lightweight and efficient as I could possibly make it, because there's some big hills, especially in the Lake District. So what I did was try and pare down the setup to make it as slim and lightweight as possible. Without further ado, let's get started. First things first, let's start with my clothing system. So I chose to walk the trail in trail runners, not boots, and with regular good quality merino wool socks, not waterproof socks. Now, I'm a passionate advocate of trail runners. Don't get me started on that one too much, but suffice to say, if I was going to do the trail again, I would use trail runners again. Even in the damper, muddier sections, because trail runners are lighter and they're more comfortable and they dry out more quickly. Now, in case of bad weather, I have my lightweight Berghaus Gore-Tex 2-layer shell jacket, and I also have a pair of Gore-Tex over trousers, waterproof over trousers. My secret weapon is this Rab Vital jacket. You'll see it a lot in the clips of me on the trail. So this is a very lightweight, it's not particularly waterproof, perhaps showerproof, but it's very windproof, breathable jacket, and that going over either this microgrid or the base layer made a huge difference to the warmth. So I swear by this thing. It only weighs about 100 grams or something. It's ridiculously light, but the warmth it gives you for the weight is fantastic. So any kind of wind shirt over a base layer or a fleece makes a huge difference and is well worth it. Around camp, when it got cold, or going to the pub or whatever in the evening, I've got my old faithful mountain equipment puffy. So I would never wear this when I'm walking because it's just a bit too hot, but around camp and early in the morning, just the job. Now, I'm a bit of a collector of hats on the trail, and I have to choose my hats carefully. So the hats that I took this time was, I have a outdoor research bucket hat. This I've showerproofed, so it's good in damp conditions, but it's very, very good at keeping the sun off you, off your face and off your neck and off your ears. And I wore this a lot on the first couple of days when it was hot and sunny. Absolutely fantastic, and quite warm as well, surprisingly. If it gets very cold and in the mornings or around the tent, got my Berghaus fleece beanie, fairly standard cheap thing, very nice and warm. And then if it gets rainy, I've got a waterproof Montane cap, and I use this not on its own but in combination with my cagoule, so that I've got this the peak of the cap keeps the hood of the cagoule off my face, and it makes a huge difference actually, so that weighs next to nothing. If it gets a bit chilly, my secret weapon is combined with the Rab Vital, is this snood thing. I made this from the body of a fairly worn out base layer merino wool top, and I just double it up and stick it around my neck. I had some lightweight outdoor research gloves. Now, because I use walking poles, these are really comfy on the palms of your hand if you get a bit sweaty, or stops them chafing and this kind of thing. These are by Outdoor Research, and they are sort of fingerless. No, they're not fingerless. They've got fingers, but they've also got like a sleeve that goes over the fingers to make them into mittens, windproof mittens. Very versatile, extremely warm. Love them to bits. So that is basically my clothing system. So let's get on to the sleep system, shall we? Right, here it is. In no particular order, I've got an Exped pillow, inflatable pillow. I chose this one because it's the lightest one I could find. Now let's talk about sleep pads, shall we? This is the Light Tour R7.5, and this has got a secret. It's dual chamber, so there's 2 inflation nozzles, one for each chamber, top and bottom. I love this thing. Why do I love it? It's very light, it's only about 650 grams, extremely high R rating, above 7. It's going to be more than enough, but most of all I love it because of the peace of mind, because it's dual chamber. If there is a problem, a leak or a puncture or whatever, isn't the end of the world, because you've got the other chamber still. You can still survive the night, still be warm and relatively comfortable. So I think that's a brilliant idea. Why don't more people do that with sleep mats? And I also found it very comfortable as well. I treated myself and I bought myself this Aerogogo pump. I'm not really a big one for sleeping mat pumps until I discovered this. This weighs 28 grams. The inflation sack that comes with the light tour bag weighs 78 grams, so it's lighter. It's light because it doesn't have a built-in battery. You just plug it into your power bank and it inflates the mat in seconds, frankly. And then on top of this, my trusty, faithful Criterion Quantum 350 bag. This is a really good bag. It's got very high lofting, high fuel power down in it. Now, one other thing to guarantee a good night's sleep is my pee bottle. Yeah, it's a thing, especially as we get to a certain age, guys. And apologies to ladies watching. I know it's frustratingly not much help to you, but for the guys, this really makes a massive, big difference. It's made such a difference to my wild camping experience. Enough said. Next thing I want to talk about is the shelter, my shelter. Now, I'm a bit of a Lanshan fanboy, we know this, but I chose to use this Durston X-Mid 1 on the trail. I wanted to keep it really light and really compact, so this was a no-brainer really. Now, of course, it made a lot of sense because I use walking poles a lot. So I've got Black Diamond Trail Flex-Lite poles. They're fantastic, especially going uphill and going downhill. They take a lot of effort off and stress off your knees and your joints and make the whole thing a lot easier. And going over rough ground, extra stability. If you're backpacking on a long trail, use walking poles. Next on the list is my rucksack. This is Osprey Exos. Extremely comfortable. It's pretty lightweight, just over a kilo, not too much over that. Now, this is the second one I've had. I did a review of the first one I had that I did 1,000 miles in. When it came to replacing it, I just got another one. Now, you'll see in the videos that I pair this with a chest pod. And this is from Treadlight Gear, and it clips onto the front of the shoulder straps and sits just on your chest. This is brilliant because it means that things that I need minute to minute while I'm on the trail, a guidebook, my phone, a boiled sweet, beanie or hat or whatever, and they're really easy to reach and access, and you can dig around in it and find what you need. Fantastic. Oh, my rucksack has got hip belt pockets on it. I'm going to be the naysayer about hip pockets. A lot of people love them. I think they're a complete waste of time because when I got my rucksack on, I cannot see down into my hip belt pocket. They're a nuisance to try and fiddle around and find things, and I find it very hard to open and close the zips on them. So to be quite honest with you, I never use them. I'd much rather have a chest pod every day. This has got 3 compartments, is made from DCF Cuban fibre. It's really tough. Just get one. And in the back pocket of the rucksack, I have my sit mat, little Thermarest Z seat with a strap to tie it if stop it blowing away. When you just pause on the trail just to sit down and keep your bum warm, and then I use it in the vestibule of the tent when I'm sort of putting my shoes and socks on off. This thing is incredibly useful. Right, we're doing quite well now. Let's go on to cook and food and all that kind of stuff. So cooking wise, I have a Soto Windmaster, brilliant even in windy conditions. Does what it says on the tin really. Very powerful, very reliable, used it for years. I've combined it with the biggest stand I could find, which happens to be the Optimus one, just for stability. I've got a Tokes 350 pot. I've got a long handled spoon. Don't use a spork, waste of time. And a homemade insulated pouch to keep food warm whilst it's rehydrating. When it comes to food, I took more than I needed to because there were far more opportunities to restock with food on the trail than I expected. So don't take too much, you will be able to restock. Okay, so that's the food. Now, how about the water? So I took this CNOC is it 650? No, it's a 1 litre bottle, and that was enough for most days. I took a filter with me. To be honest with you, I only needed this a day or two in the Lake District. You don't really need a filter unless you're just trying to be belt and braces. And I also took this 2.5 litre CNOT bag for campsite use. When I need to have enough water for cooking and stuff like that, just to save time. So that was plenty. Well, one thing I would say is that in my personal sort of wash kit bag, I took sun cream, and I used factor 50 every day, even in October, and I needed it because even in the winter you're getting a lot exposed to a lot of UV rays and wind, so wear the factor 50, folks. I've also got foot powder in here just to keep myself fresh. This is my something's gone wrong bag. It's got some Compeed in there, needle and thread, pain relief pills, all that kind of stuff. Devices. I took a power charger adapter plug that I could use to recharge my devices. I used 2 types of power banks. The first one is the Nightcore NU10000. I had 2 of those. And I also have a Nightcore NU5000, a little ditty slim one that's absolutely brilliant just for topping up the phone during the day. This is my Motorola Defy emergency beacon thing. I'm travelling on my own. If I have a problem, particularly in the hills, even if there's no mobile phone signal, I can hit the big red button and hopefully sooner or later a helicopter will appear. This is my toilet bag, if you like. If you get caught short on the trail or whatever, this is it. It's got my little shovel in here, biodegradable wipes. Right, so I always keep this handy. That's the toilet bag for when I'm on the trail. Navigation. So I have a DCF bag that I keep my map in. Now, I took the Harvey map, the 1 to 40,000 mile map of the trail, and also the 1 to 25,000 map little booklet that comes with the Cicerone guide. I used this 40,000 map purely for planning and overview purposes only. The scale I found wasn't big enough to be much use on the trail. This little booklet with the 1 to 25,000 maps was much more useful, workable scale. I did have the Coast to Coast Walk guide on Kindle on my phone. Right, so that's it. That's my setup. I think it came into reasonable weight. There's nothing in here that was obsolete or wasn't used. And likewise, there was nothing that I forgot that I sort of really could have done with on the trail. Right, so that's the gear that I used. Now, what about these 8 top tips for you? My number 1 tip is to watch out for your navigation and maps. So the trail is evolving all the time, especially now it's become a national trail. The maps that you might have in guidebooks or on printed maps or on a GPX file may not be accurate anymore. So be very, very careful. Make sure you're using the very latest maps and files you can get your hands on, and keep your wits about you when you're on the trail. Look out for possible changes over the route you might have on your map. Tip number 2 is very closely linked to tip number 1, and that is do not trust the finger posts, the little wooden pointing signs. They are very good in some areas of the trail and non-existent in others. So if you're happily walking along, just looking out and relying on seeing the next finger post, beware, it may not exist. So do not trust them. They're very nice to confirm you're on the right track when you do see them, but don't depend on them. Tip number 3 is to manage your mileage expectations. Now, I kind of blitzed the trail. I did it in 11 days in the end, and with hindsight, I'm not sure that was the best way to do it. It meant I got home nice and quickly, but it meant that mentally I was kind of more fixated on putting in the miles every day and reaching that target, and I didn't really have the mental time and space to enjoy the walk so much. So you'll know what number of miles you can happily achieve each day. And I would say, if you can, add in an extra day just for a margin for comfort, for safety, and perhaps so you can take a rest day if you feel like you need it halfway through the trail or something like that. Don't overstretch yourself. Remember that in particular the Lake District section is very, very mountainous. You will be going very, very slowly up some of those hills. My next tip is to be very careful about the footwear that you choose to wear. Quite seriously, your feet will make or break your enjoyment of the trail. If your feet aren't comfortable and happy, then you won't be happy either. I'm going to try and keep this short because I'm very passionate about this subject, but basically, wear trail runners, do not wear walking boots. Now, why do you say that? Well, trail runners are lighter, which makes a difference when you're going up and down hills. They are usually more comfortable. They usually have better padding underneath, especially if you buy one with a nice thick padded sole, and they dry out more quickly. Most of the people I saw on the trail were wearing trail runners these days, and they're becoming more and more common. Now, I know trail runners are not waterproof, I get that, but if you combine them with very good quality socks, merino wool, or even waterproof socks if you want to, that's really not an issue. Your feet will stay comfortable and they will stay warm, and more importantly, they will dry out. Once a leather walking boot gets wet, it is going to be wet for the duration of the trail. It's not going to dry out properly. It's going to be heavy and uncomfortable. It will make a difference. You will thank me. My next tip is about water. Now, I was very worried about having enough water last me through the day. In the Lake District, of course, there's plenty of streams and lakes you can top up a water bottle from, but on the more easterly sections, I was worried about having enough water, and I ended up carrying too much. So I only eventually needed about a litre with me to last me the whole day, and throughout the trail there are often places where you can top up a water bottle. Now, water is very heavy and bulky, and so if you end up carrying more than you need to, that's just pure excess weight in your pack. So don't worry, don't carry excess water. There are plenty of places to top up your water bottle along the way, and you don't need to worry about it. Tip number 6, should you go east to west or west to east? Now, the prevailing winds are west to east, and that's the way that most people seem to walk, perhaps largely because Wainwright himself suggested walking it in that direction, but it isn't necessarily the right way to go. I found that walking from east to west meant that I was kind of physically and mentally fit, ready for the Lake District, and the Lake District is a marvellous sort of culmination to the walk with the fantastic scenery. And if I was going to do the trail again, I think I'd be inclined to do it the same way. So don't just follow the herd, think about what works best for you. Tip number 7, and this is an important one, do as much training as you possibly can. Put in lots of miles with a pack on before you start on the trail. Your body will thank you for it. If you end up getting fatigued and tired with aching muscles, you're not going to enjoy the walk. So the more you can prepare your body for it, the better. So in the few weeks leading up to the trail, I was putting in regular 20-mile walks from home, and I was seeing a physiotherapist at least once a week to make sure my muscles were being looked after and I was in good shape, ready to enjoy the trail. And I really urge you to get in as much training mileage as you possibly can. My final tip, number 8, is perhaps the most important one, and that's to really try and enjoy the trail. Sure, it is a significant physical challenge. It's many days putting in serious miles on some quite big hills, but it's easy to let that physical challenge and getting the miles and then getting to the destination distract you from just enjoying the experience and the wonderful countryside that you're walking through. So don't just have your head down thinking, well, I've got to put in another 5 miles before I take a break, etc., which is very easy to do. Just step back, stop every now and again and just take in the surroundings, the smells, the sounds, the sights, and just relish every single moment of the trail. The great thing about the coast to coast is that pretty much every day is a little bit different. So savour the variety of the countryside that you're walking through, and then you'll end up with some really amazing memories. Right, so that's it. That's my personal gear and the 8 top tips I have for you to help you enjoy the coast to coast. I really hope it's useful to you. Please let me know if you've got any thoughts or suggestions of your own in the comments, and I really hope you enjoy walking the trail.